Welcome to the Unapologetic Mompreneur, the podcast for mums with an online business who are ready to take back their time, home, business, and self so they can restore the balance and thrive, both at home and at work, without feeling like they have to choose between the two. I'm your host, Sarah Dew, life and biz coach for mompreneurs. I'm also a mum, stepmom, wife, introvert, breast cancer survivor, and your mentor for making a change for the better. I've learned how to go from surviving to thriving and unapologetically create a business I love and the life I want for me and my family without worrying about what other people think. And now I'm here to help you do the same. Because being an unapologetic mompreneur doesn't mean that we're selfish or that we don't care about others. It simply means that we are not afraid to show up as our true, authentic selves, to step into our purpose, do what we know is right for ourselves and the ones we love, and take the steps we need to take to make our dream life and business a reality. Join me each week where I'll be sharing all of my best tips and strategies, plus the occasional dose of tough but gentle love to help you feel empowered, motivated, and confident to take action so that you can become the mum, wife, biz owner, and woman you know you are meant and deserve to be. So, are you ready to unapologetically create a business and life you love? Let's do this. Hey Joe, welcome to the Unapologetic Mompreneur podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to dive in with everything. We're going to be talking all about branding and how to build a brand that stands out. And it's a topic because we've known each other for a little while now. And you were a guest speaker fairly recently, a few months back at my Thrive Network group. And I knew when you shared everything there that we had to have you on the podcast. So I'm super excited to dive into everything. Before we do, just in case anybody hasn't met you before, do you just want to share a little bit about you, your journey, your family, and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. I obviously came on and did the masterclass with you and stuff, and it's really nice to be here to go through it all again. But basically, I am a freelance graphic designer. I specialize in branding and logo design, but I create all sorts of marketing materials and packaging for people. I started out being a graphic designer in London, and as many people who are listening will have done, I moved away from London and I started a family literally at the same time. And so I couldn't really go back to the job that I had in London because it just didn't work. Initially, I was just contracting when I had my first child. But when I had my second child and came off maternity leave, I was like, this is really hard. And I found it really difficult. Not long after, we also kind of went into COVID and everyone got locked down and everything else. But one of the things that I learned a lot about in the COVID times was social media. And when we came out of that, I could tell that there's been a major shift in people working from home and that being more acceptable. And that's when I thought my son was about to start school. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and do this myself rather than going and contracting and going into big businesses and working for them for however many days or weeks. I actually want to have my own clients and work with small businesses and yeah, so that's how I started Joe Higgs Creative.
Love that. And yeah, I think it's just being able to have that freedom and flexibility doing things our way and not being called by, what to do when we can take time off, when all the other deadlines, being able to call the shots. And I love that you focus on those projects with smaller businesses too. So when you were just all about diving into branding itself, what would you say are the fundamentals? What is branding when we're thinking about it? And how do we go about, what does it mean to have a professional brand identity?
Yeah. So whenever I'm talking about branding, I think it's quite helpful to just start with literally the bare basics of the literal words brand, branding, and brand identity, because I think they get bandied around quite a lot and they can sound quite daunting if you don't really know about them. So they're really, really simple. Effectively, your brand is what people think of you, and I mean what people think of your business. So just be careful how you feel about that. But like what people think of your business. Um, and your branding is all the like millions of ways you could potentially use branding, but your branding is all the deliberate things that you do to change that, to make people how they think about your business. And your brand identity is something that is generally more visual, but not always. But essentially, it's a toolkit that you use with things like logos, colors, fonts. It's the area that I help people with. But it can be photos and it can be your tone of voice on everything that you write and everything else. But your identity is like the visuals and the toolkit that you have to enhance your branding. So your branding's quite a rich array of things that you can potentially do. So it's not just like one thing, but hopefully that sort of like spaces it out a bit clear and simple so that it doesn't sound like unobtainable for people.
Yeah, it's really good because actually when we think about branding, we can literally just think that it's like our logo and our colours and that's it, isn't it? But there's so much more to it. And that's what I thought it was when I dove in. I was like, yep, I've now got branding, I've got my logo, I've got my
Yeah.
colour. And then actually it's like, no, and then I start thinking about what our messaging is and tone of voice and everything else. So that's kind of, I guess that's like the fundamentals of branding. Why would you say getting them right from the get-go is so key?
Yeah, so I think that getting your fundamentals right is so important because otherwise you're just flailing around in the dark basically. So you can make things that look nice and that's lovely. And obviously as a designer, I aim to make things look good. But if they are not thought about, if there's no strategy behind it, if there's no reason why you've chosen these things, then they're not actually going to do the job you need them to do. So you need to get back to basics and work out your fundamentals. And that is like, there's a few different things that ideally you would have in place and understand before you really put loads of energy into building your brand or changing your brand. And that's things like your core values. It's things like you might have a mission statement or something like that, but at least have in your mind what it is that you actually stand for as a business and what you want to represent, even if it's not like an official mission statement. And then you've got things like well, one of the things I think people might skip if they don't really know is feelings. So when I say feelings, I don't mean like your feelings as a business owner because they can be pretty erratic. What I mean is what you want your clients to feel when they come to you, like when they come to your business, whether they've gone to your website, whether they've met you, whether they've come to your socials, wherever it is that they've the touch point that they've got with you, how do you want them to feel? So obviously that will really depend on your business and like what you actually want to achieve from it. So, do you want them to feel like excited? Oh, this person's really fun. Oh, this is great. Like, do you want them to feel like that? Or do you want them to feel calm? You want them instantly, you want their nervous system to calm down or whatever it is, because the reality is that we all buy emotionally. So if somebody is going to work with you, if you're a service, or if somebody's going to buy something from you, the chances are it's an emotional choice. Like they either really connect with you and really like you and think, yeah, I really want to work with this person, or they want that product because they feel something, it makes them feel special or it makes them feel good or whatever it is. So I think that feelings can often get overlooked when you're looking at your fundamentals. So people get a bit caught up in standing out. And sometimes that can be like, oh, I need it to be really bright because I need to stand out, for example. Um, and I think that, there's the phrase, there's no such thing as bad press, but obviously for most people there is. So I think that it's thinking about like, it's just thinking, no, I don't want to stand out for the sake of standing out. I want sort of flip it a bit. And it's more about actually, who do I want to connect with? Who do I want to attract? And if you've got the right fundamentals and you've got that person in mind, who is my core, who is my core audience? Who do I want to work with? Then you build your whole branding around that. So if you ever think, oh, should I do this or this? I'm not really sure. Then you can go back to those foundations. You can go back and say, oh, yeah, no, this totally fits with my core values. This is like exactly how I want people to feel. This will really help this or this. And you can make that decision with a lot more thought and strategy.
Awesome. And I think because when you first start going out, or even if you want to go through a rebrand and things have changed for you, it can be so overwhelming, can't it? It's like, where do I start? And knowing that it's more about, logos and colors, it's actually when you start looking at it from that perspective of who is my ideal client, who do I want to serve, what do I stand for, what are my core beliefs and values? Actually, those are the things that are going to make us stand out anyway, aren't they? Those are the things that are going to help people connect to us. So that's just super helpful for anybody that's listening that is just like, actually, I don't know where to start. Just do exactly what you said, is spend some time even journaling about, who is it? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? And I
Yeah.
suppose then that can really help us to then start putting it together. So I know that you work a lot with smaller brands, but what is it? And you mentioned about big brands before as well. It's like, is there anything we can learn from the big brands to help us stand out with our own branding and put our own branding in place as small business owners?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to that I mean I've heard other people say it as well who have who freelance, because years ago we'd just say we were freelancers and that would be it. In the design world I'm talking about specifically. But if you do think of yourself as a business, because you are a business, because you do have profit and loss and you have all the elements that a business has, you have to market yourself and you have to get work in and all that kind of thing. I think that it's thinking what works in a large business. And if you've got a brand, a really well-known brand, so I'll just talk from a designer's point of view. I've worked with large corporations, and actually designing is incredibly uncreative because they have these incredible like brand guidelines that literally nail everything down. Because if you've got thousands of people creating your marketing, you need it all to be consistent. And I think that what you can take from that as a small business is consistency. And I know that that's a word again that gets used quite a lot. But all I mean by that is if somebody meets you, and then you say, oh, yeah, these are my socials, they go to your socials and they think, you know what, this person's great. I think I'm going to work with them. And then they go to your website and they're like, oh, who's this? Like, it's almost like so different to everything they've seen so far. You can potentially like lose them because they're sort of like, oh, I don't know who this person is. And there's question marks all of a sudden. But if every single touch point they have is giving the same look and feel, and it's keeping that consistency, you know instantly that you're still with that brand. So big brands really have nailed down like brand guidelines. You know, how much space has to be put around a logo, for example, how, exactly what fonts in what situations for what products, like it's really nailed down. So I think that the continuity side of things is something that I don't underestimate it, because especially if you've had branding done by a designer and you've got like a nice brand identity, like make sure that if create a flyer or whatever it is that you do, a brochure, or you're doing, for example, like you're setting something up and you're doing like a workshop, make sure it's all branded, make sure it still all looks professional and it all looks like you. And then every touch point is just like building. I think branding, I like to explain it a bit like, like a vision board, or almost like it's basically like a layering process. It's like lots and lots, and the more you put into it, the richer it becomes. But the overall picture has to look cohesive. It can't be like, going from one extreme to the other. So I think things like socials are slightly different because you can put a lot of yourself in there, and there's things like video, and there's different things that you can use that aren't, it's a bit more fluid in that way. But I still think that as long as you're not jumping about with your fonts and not jumping about with what your main colors that you use and stuff, and not just trying anything that comes along, sort of thing. At the very basics, just have the basics that kind of look the same, and you have the same look and feel in your photos, roughly. It doesn't have to be that they all look exactly the same, obviously, but you've got that same feel about it. Yeah, so a big business, like big brands are really good at that, the continuity and keeping everything. If you walk into, Nike in London, or you walk into Nike in Dubai, it's going to look the same. You're in a Nike shop, like everything, the labels, everything is the same. So yeah, so I think it's just remembering that all the touch points, not just your website or just your socials, ideally we need to have that continuity. That's probably the main one. I mean, there's lots of different, I mean, God, I guess you can learn so much from big brands, but I guess one of the other easy ones to think about is how big brands like adapt to things and how they have like specialist teams within a business. So I think that you need to remember, once you obviously get a bit established and you know where your strengths are and where you're maybe wasting time and losing time, I think that outsourcing can be like really valuable. And it doesn't have to be a consistent thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have someone doing something for you permanently, but it might be that you get a web designer in to really sort your website out, for example, because the amount of time and energy it can take. I think one of the dangers of things like DIY websites and Canva and all of those things is because people can, it means they think they should. And so it's like, it might not be the best use of your time to spend 2 hours doing something that a designer can do in half an hour when you could be implanting that time into something else. So, for example, when I used to work at TUI Travel, and we used to work on their like brochures, and we used to work on their in-flight magazines, there was a team that selected photos. The designers did not select photos. There was a team of copywriters. And then as a designer, you would be given a limited selection to choose from for each thing. And then if, for example, you'd then get an editor, or someone else would come in and say, yeah, no, that needs to be bigger. And then you'd have to go back to the copywriter and say, oh, that needs to be less words. That, you know, so they'd say, oh, how many words? You know, it's that kind of stuff where the expertise of all the different individuals were called upon to create this thing. It wasn't down to one person. So I think that even in a like a big business like that, obviously they can employ multiple people, and that's totally different. And your budget isn't like endless as a small business. But it is something to think about. Is there anywhere where I'm like, you know, really getting stressed, or I'm really wasting a lot of time? And then maybe I could have some help with that. So yeah.
That's really useful, actually. And we were literally talking just before we came on, worry about my website and trying to move things across. And I'm literally thinking, yeah, I probably should just get someone to do it for me, because it is a waste of my time for what I do in my business that I could be spending doing like elsewhere. And I'm at that stage now where I need to think probably about having a VA to take hold of my socials, because that, just because I can do it and give me any excuse to play in Canva and I'm there. But is it the best use of my time? Is it the best use of my skills? Probably not. So yeah, that is so useful. And having that like brand board and having those brand guidelines, even though we're small businesses, it can feel like maybe a bit of an unnecessary step of like, it's just me. I know what I'm doing. I know what my logo is, but actually having it laid out helps with that consistency, doesn't it? Because then if you're at an event or a networking event, or you're speaking to someone on a client call or a prospective client, and then they go and stalk, because they will, because they want to check you out and make sure that you're like the right person for them.
Yeah.
If it is disjointed, you're going to lose that trust with them, aren't you? So that is super helpful. Just see that perspective of what the bigger brands are doing, and how they adapt and things. So what would you say are the must-haves for a professional brand identity? We talked about a few little bits and pieces, but what would you say are like, if we're thinking about revamping our branding, or we're just starting out, what are the absolute must-haves for us to be able to feel like we've got that professional brand identity?
Yeah, so I think I always like to caveat before I say about this, because like don't panic if you haven't got it all sorted, or if it's not looking like it's on the horizon, or you know, I am like, this is my fourth year, you know, I'm about to start running the business, and you know, I don't have literally everything that I could have for my business. So but it is helpful to know what's going to be helpful. And particularly if you are thinking of investing in like branding, you want to know what you should be getting out of that, I think. So your absolute basics, I mean, obviously when you start, you have nothing. So you can still start a business with nothing. That's okay. And if you've done a DIY logo just to get yourself out there, great. That's, you know, but what normally happens is you get to a point where you're like, yeah, this doesn't really work for me, or I can't use my logo because it doesn't fit here, or whatever it is. And then that's when you normally, you know, you get to a point where it's become really frustrating. So every time you're trying to like do stuff, your business, you're spending too long, you have too many questions, you don't know what's going on. So the main things that I would say is, with a brand, like a brand identity in the sense of how I would create a brand identity as a designer, you ultimately will have some brand guidelines, which won't be as comprehensive as Nike or any of those big brands, but it will be, these are our logos, like, they should only be this color on dark backgrounds, this color on white, light backgrounds. This is our color palette. Do not use any other colors in our design. Then you'll have all the codes to that. So if you give it to a website designer, they've got their hex codes. And if you give it to like a print designer, they've got their CMYK codes. And there's all the codes. You don't need to worry about what they are, but they're there. So even if you don't know what they are, they'll be on there. And if they are relevant to somebody, they will have them. The fonts, what fonts you are using. So sometimes people get a bit tripped up around fonts. So I don't know if it's always explained to people. Sometimes people come to me and they certainly haven't had it explained to them. But fonts, some fonts need licenses. So if you go to Google Fonts, for example, they are all free to use. So if you want to ensure that you never have to pay for any fonts and everything's safe and you can use it anywhere, and you don't have the budget, then you can happily use, for example, Google Fonts. And there's like hundreds, so there's choices. But if you have purchased a font, you need to have like a license for that. So for example, if I'm creating a brand identity for somebody, I would always explain to them, with this font, you'll need to buy the license because I've bought the license to use it if I've used it in your logo or whatever it is, or it's incorporated in my software like that I pay for. But if you want to use it going forward and you want to use it on your website or you want to use it here and here, you personally need to have that license for it. So it's things like that now I think with AI, I have heard of more people getting contacted, or have you got a license, have you got a license for this if it's used on a website? It's unlikely to get picked up if it's printed on something, and it's unlikely to get picked up even on your socials, to be honest, because it becomes an image when you make it. It's not actually the font anymore, so the bots can't pick it up. But I have heard of website design, so it's just having fonts that you can use, but knowing that you're okay to use them. So when you use Canva, for example, you get all the fonts within Canva, and that's great. But if you want to then use that font on your website, you might then encounter a problem because you might not have the licensing for it. It's not that you can't potentially buy the licensing for it, but it's just understanding that there are certain things around it that are slightly different to other things. And one of my sort of if you get a professional designer who says they're going to create you a logo, then I would question that, because you really do need a logo suite. And when I say a logo suite, I just mean like a selection of logos. The big brands all have selections. So you don't need hundreds. Like, it's just a case of you will need at least 2 colorways, one that works on a dark background, one that works on a light. And you will need them in various formats, but also when I say formats, I mean different file types for different reasons. But also it's the layout of the logo. So if you've got a particularly long business name, for example, it's great, you could have like a long, thin version of it, but you will also need a more squat version of it. And for some businesses, you might have an icon that you use as well, for example. But it doesn't have to be, but it might be. And yeah, so it's basically having different logos that fit in different situations, because I do get a bit like triggered and my eye starts twitching when I look on like socials and someone's tried to cram their enormous logo like into a tiny space, or they've got that thing where they've got like a little white bar across the top and the bottom. Because of course, if they've done it themselves, I'm not like judging them, but what I mean is, especially if I know it was designed, I'm like, because it should have been designed in a way that they had options and choices, and they should never be in a situation going forward where none of the logos work because they just don't fit, because they should have, the designer should have thought of that. So I think it's more of a kind of not essential, nothing's essential, I guess, to a certain extent, but it's more the ideal. The ideal is you've got a logo suite, you've got brand guidelines that explain all of the color palette and everything that you've decided, and also things like assets. So when I say assets, I mean like shapes or illustrations or little things that you dot around, some people it's quite abstract, squiggles and circles or whatever. And then other people, it might be quite a detailed drawing of something. But it's something that, again, can be used to what I was saying before about the layering up, can be used to add interest, can be used to make it look more professional. And makes it more versatile, means you can do more things with it if you've got some bespoke assets as well. So photos, I mean, I don't do photography, but photos are a game changer as well, I think. Once you get to a point where you can afford it, I would get professional photos done. You don't always have to use professional photos. You can still put like, especially on social media, you can still put like, I mean, we've all got like really quite good cameras on our phones now, and you can use stuff. But I think that if you are going to someone's website and you're expecting them to pay them a decent amount of money for their service, you do need to have like professional photos. Um, so yeah, so I think, or at least professional looking. I don't know how you do that without having professional photos, but you know what I mean. Um, yeah, I think they're kind of the main fundamentals from a sort of imagery point of view of things.
Amazing. That is so helpful. And that's actually one of the best explanations I've ever had or heard on it, which is just fantastic, especially like with the fonts, because that can be such a minefield of knowing what you can use, what you can't, when you can use it, when you can't, and everything else. And totally agree with the photos, because once I had mine done, it totally elevated my website, my brand. It makes you feel more professional. It makes you feel more confident knowing that you've got those and that you can just use them everywhere. But yeah, and definitely like the logos. I've had to look at that with mine, because mine is, I pick a word that's really long. I go with unapologetic and then I add mompreneur to it. So my logo is like super, super long. So I've had to do that and like cut it down for like the favicon for the tabs on the website, and having stamps that I can then use on socials, because otherwise sharing that every time, it's ridiculously long. So yeah, that's super helpful to know. And it, like, just starting out and going back and thinking about who it is that you want to serve and what you stand for, and then knowing what to create, just takes away a lot of that overwhelm of knowing where to start, doesn't it? This has
Yeah.
been so, so good. So with all of that in mind and thinking about what we can learn from the bigger brands and everything else,
Yeah.
what sort of like top tips do you have for making our brand standing out? If we want to stand out on socials without having to be loud with all the colors and everything else, what can we do to make our brand stand out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it boils down to like your messaging and remembering if you're particularly talking about socials, because obviously not everybody is marketing on mainly on socials, but if you're talking about socials, it's obviously like short attention spans, quick messaging, keep the wording simple, keep your key messages like obvious, make everything obvious what you're saying. And don't be afraid to like sell. So don't be afraid to say, I do this thing. I certainly follow people where I know what their job is, but I don't really know what they offer. Like I don't know, if they do power hours, I don't know if they do like if there's set courses that they do or whatever it is, you know. And I think that remembering that people are having to wade through a lot of stuff to notice your thing. As long as your messaging is clear and you know who you're talking to, then those people should notice it. Does that make sense? Like, if you make it wishy-washy and it's not really aimed at a particular, I don't know, a particular client or whatever it is, um, then it's going to get like missed, or if it's too vague or whatever it is. So I think for things like socials, I think for things like say you had a brochure, for example, or on your website where it's people are spending a bit longer and they're like, you know, then obviously like good design in terms of like it looks good and it sends a message. The thing is with design is you don't notice good design, you only notice bad design. Do you know what I mean? You might think something looks quite good if it's like quite, I don't know, trendy, but you actually don't notice good design because it's doing its job. It's literally just giving you information. It's giving information from one place to another. Yeah, I think standing out, I think everyone needs to sort of like maybe, like I said before, maybe reframe it. I don't need to like, I don't, necessarily want to stand out. I want to attract. I want people to be attracted to what I'm doing. So in that case, I need to know who I'm trying to attract, and I need to really make it clear what I'm saying to them. So yeah, too many words. I know that now you can, I think on socials I get a bit, or maybe it's just me because I have like a short attention span. But like when you get the ones where you go, like you swipe across and they've got the same picture and they have words, 3 or 4 in, I'm done. I mean, maybe if I was like really, really interested, but 10, 15, I'm just not going. I'm just not, I'm just not. So if you haven't got me in the first three, then you haven't got me. And so I can't be the only one. So I think it's like, don't get me wrong, there are times, I think the problem is it's format, isn't it? Like socials, you can't say lots of words, but on your website you can have whole sections that are dedicated. So if somebody is interested and they go to your website, you can make it clear where they find out more about this thing. So you get like your bullet points and then they go to another page and then they get more details. But on socials, it's very different. You can't overload people because they're just not going to take it all in. So getting noticed, I think, is just being like clear, like literally. That could be clear with your message, but also clear with your writing. Please be careful with your writing, everyone, because when you use certain fonts, I've seen a couple of fonts. Sorry, I'm literally going on one now. Sorry, but it's like
No, I'm loving it. Go.
when the font that's used, the letters are so close together. So like the tracking or like basically the space between the letters is too tight, and that makes it actually quite difficult to read. So again, don't make it hard for people. Like make it as easy as possible. Like it's nice to have an interesting font, for example, but maybe use it as like a header, like what I offer. And then it's like clear writing underneath, like what you can actually read that you're not having to like really work hard to do. And so take out barriers, I would say, is and have your message very clear. I won't rant
Okay.
anymore.
No, that's a really great way to put it. And I think actually reframing standing out to attracting again takes away some of that overwhelm and that like, what do I need to do? How am I going to do it? How am I going to stand out? But actually is who am I wanting to attract and what is my messaging
Yeah.
is going to make it so much easier. Thank you so much. This has been so good. I literally could chat with you about this all day. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add of like one final golden nugget or just anything that sort of comes to mind as like one like closing point?
I mean, I could mention that I've got a free download which talks you through your fundamentals. So that is something that I created because of this, because sometimes basically when people come to me, they're at different stages of their business and sometimes they have no idea what they're kind of like doing. And then they look at my questionnaire and they go through it all and they say that was really helpful. So this isn't for like all the people that either aren't getting professional branding done or are not at a stage to do that yet, but they can still get the benefits of doing that work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think the golden nugget information is probably going back to what we spoke about at the beginning of just like knowing all that stuff about your business, like why and what and who, yeah, and just having all of that nice and clear because that can definitely help with overwhelm at like any stage of your business because it's like a reference guide to what you're doing. But yeah, and I have a download that talks you through that. So
Crazy. And it's fantastic. I've already been through it and seen it, and you
oh.
shared it when we were at the Thrive Network. So if you haven't got that yet, go and snag it. I'll make sure that the link is in the show notes for you. And if anybody else wants to reach out with you, I've got a question that I always love asking all of my guests at the end of every episode. But before we do that, do you just want to share where people can find you? Again, they'll be in the show notes, but yeah, just share if people want to come and say hi and ask more about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mainly hang out over on Instagram. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and that's at Joe Higgs Creative, and it's HIGGS, Joe Higgs Creative. My website is you can find my website via those socials, but my website is joannehiggs.co.uk. And the free download is then /free download. It's that simple. But yeah, so that's mainly where I am. I am on LinkedIn, but I don't go in there very often. So I don't even know how you do a link. Like I don't even know what to say my link would be, but obviously I am Joe Higgs Creative over there as well. But yeah, so that's mainly where I am. And it's just like, yeah, if you find me via the podcast, say hi and say that's how you found me and that would be lovely. But yeah.
Amazing. We will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes, and especially for the download too. And then finally, to wrap up, a question that I love asking all of my guests is, what does being an unapologetic mompreneur mean to you? And how do you show up unapologetically every day, both as a mum and as the boss of your business?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think one of the things that really helps is defining what you feel is successful and managing your expectations. Those are my two key points. So, for example, I feel successful if I am able to balance running my own business and having children in the way that I want to do it. So, I work part-time. I take fairly big chunks in the holidays off normally. It all works around me and my family, but it's also because I work project by project, like most clients wouldn't even notice it. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't affect anybody. But it works for me, and I can feel like no guilt about that at all because that's literally I'm choosing to do it. And running your own business, as you know, is not easy. So it's like a lot of hard work, and you have to have passion to do it in the first place. So you need to there's somebody I know who says like don't be your own worst boss, and that's just like when you're thinking about where's all this pressure, it's like you're literally putting it on yourself. So absolutely embrace that. Yeah, embrace what works for you and accept that. And expectations, like we would all love it if we've all been like in the flow and want to carry on working and then had to do the school pickup, or like something's come up and it's clashed with something else and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's like, actually, if you had a real job, that's terrible. Sorry. If you had an employed job, you have to do lots of things all the time that don't really work for you and you don't really want to do them. And this is a better situation for you. That's why you've chosen it. So, but also accept that it's not perfect because nothing is. So, things are gonna sort of go a bit like that sometimes, but yeah, we're all doing it for a reason, and keeping that in mind.
Love that so much. And just, being afraid of defining our own definition of success. And if it looks different from everybody else, that's great. So I love that. Thank you so much, Jo. This has been so, so much fun. I really appreciate it. And I'm pretty sure that everybody listening is going to be so many great nuggets that they're going to have to, want to take away and go back and listen to again with a notebook and pen and jot everything down. So yeah, thank you so, so much. And before we wrap up, just go and get Jo's guide, go and download it and dive into it because it is fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, Jo. And thank you everybody for listening, for watching on YouTube if you have been. And that's it for today, and look forward to chatting with you in the next episode. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining me for another installment of the Unapologetic Mompreneur podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, I would love for you to leave me a rating and a review so that other mompreneurs can find this podcast too. Here's to unapologetically becoming the mum, wife, biz owner, and woman you know you are meant and deserve to be. I can't wait to chat with you in the next episode. Bye for now.